scuba diving near a shipwreck, exploring its secrets. Air bubbles obscured vision for just a moment. When they cleared, face to face with an ancient predator, eyes like obsidian, filled with primal hunger. The diver's scream muffled by the regulator. In the deep, no one can hear you cry for help. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we begin the ORCA ATTACK story, I want to ask for your support by subscribing to the channel. Your subscription is very important to us, so please subscribe, click the like button, and leave a comment telling us which city you're watching from. Now let's move on to the case. The crisp Shetland air nipped at Dr. Emma Sinclair's cheeks as she stood on the deck of the research vessel, Selkie, her eyes scanning the horizon where steel-gray waves met an equally somber sky. The harbor of Lerwick was slowly receding behind them, the town's colorful buildings becoming mere specks in the distance. Dr. Sinclair, we finished securing the hydrophones, called out Jack Thompson, a lanky postdoc with a mop of unruly red hair. He approached her, clipboard in hand, a look of barely contained excitement on his freckled face. Emma nodded, her lips curving into a small smile. Excellent work, Jack. Make sure the recording equipment is properly calibrated. We can't afford any mistakes on this expedition. As Jack hurried off to double-check the equipment, Emma's gaze returned to the vast expanse of the North Sea. Somewhere out there, pods of orcas were traversing these waters, their haunting songs echoing through the depths. It was these magnificent creatures that had brought Emma and her team to the remote Shetland Islands. The Selkie cut through the waves with purpose, its engine a steady hum beneath their feet. Emma made her way to the ship's bridge where Captain Moira McLeod stood at the helm, her weathered hands steady on the wheel. "How's it looking, Captain?" Emma asked, stepping up beside the older woman. Moira's eyes, the color of storm clouds, never left the horizon. "Aye, the weather's holding for now, Dr. Sinclair. But these waters can turn treacherous in the blink of an eye. We'd best make good time while we can." Emma nodded, understanding the weight of the captain's words. The North Sea was notorious for its unpredictable nature, and even in late spring, the threat of a sudden squall was ever present. As the morning wore on, the research team fell into a rhythm of preparation and anticipation. Dr. Liam Chen, the B team's marine biologist, meticulously checked and rechecked their observation equipment. Sarah Patel, their data analyst, ran through final system checks on the ship's computers. It was just past noon when the cry went up from the crow's nest. "Orca's off the starboard bow." The word sent a jolt of electricity through the entire crew. Emma rushed to the railing, binoculars already pressed to her eyes. There, breaching the surface about half a mile out, was the unmistakable dorsal fin of an adult male orca. "Jack, Sarah, get up here," Emma called out, her voice tight with excitement. "Liam, start recording." The team scrambled into action, a well-oiled machine despite their obvious enthusiasm. As they watched, more fins broke the surface. 1, 2, 3. Emma counted at least 7 individuals in the pod. "My God," breathed Sarah, her dark eyes wide with wonder. "They're magnificent." Emma couldn't help but agree. No matter how many times she'd seen orcas in the wild, the sight never failed to take her breath away. These apex predators, often misunderstood and feared, moved through the water with a grace that belied their power. "All right, team," Emma said, tearing her gaze away from the spectacle. "Let's get to work. Jack, I want you on photo identification. Sarah, start logging their behavior patterns. Liam, how are those hydrophones coming along?" Liam gave a thumbs up from his station near the stern. "Ready to deploy, Dr. Sinclair." For the next several hours, the Selkie shadowed the pod at a respectful distance. The orcas seemed unbothered by their presence, occasionally approaching, close enough for the team to hear their exhalations as they surfaced. As the afternoon wore on, Emma gathered her team on the main deck for a briefing. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the sharp tang of salt and the promise of rain. "All right, everyone," she began, her voice raised to be heard over the wind and waves. "We've had a fantastic start to our expedition. This pod seems to be following the typical migration patterns we've observed in previous years, but there's something unique about their vocalizations that I'd like us to focus on." She pulled out a tablet, bringing up a spectrogram of the orca calls they'd recorded earlier. "See this pattern here? It's unlike anything we've documented in this region before. It could be a dialect specific to this pod, or perhaps Emma's words were cut off by a sudden loud exhalation nearby. The team turned as one to see a massive female orca surface less than 50 meters from the boat. Its black and white coloration stood out starkly against the gray sea, its dorsal fin towering over the waves. "Incredible," Jack whispered, his camera clicking rapidly. "She must be at least 7 meters long." The orca regarded them with one dark, inscrutable eye before diving beneath the surface once more. The team held their collective breath, waiting to see if it would reappear. Moments stretched into minutes, but the orca did not resurface near them. Emma felt a strange mix of exhilaration and unease settle in her stomach. Something about that lone female's behavior seemed off. "Dr. Sinclair," Captain McLeod's voice crackled over the ship's intercom. "You might want to come to the bridge. There's a storm front moving in faster than expected." Emma acknowledged the call, then turned to her team. "All right, let's start wrapping things up for the day. Jack, make sure all our surface observations are properly logged. Sarah, I want a preliminary analysis of today's data ready by dinner. Liam, let's get those hydrophones back on board." As the team dispersed to their tasks, Emma made her way to the bridge. Outside, the sky had darkened ominously, the wind picking up strength with each passing minute. Captain McLeod's face was grim as Emma entered. "We've got a nasty bit of weather headed our way, Doctor. I recommend we head back to port for the night." Emma nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Safety first, Captain. We'll pick up where we left off tomorrow." As the Selkie began its journey back to Lerwick, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just slipped through their fingers. She stood at the stern, watching the waves where they'd last seen the pod, now obscured by the gathering gloom. Little did she know, beneath the churning surface, unseen eyes were watching the retreating vessel. The lone female orca, far larger and older than any in her pod, circled slowly in the depths. In her world of sound and sensation, the strange noises from the boat above had stirred something primal, something protective. As night fell over the North Sea, bringing with it the first lashings of rain and wind, both hunters, human and cetacean, retreated to the safety of their respective domains. But the encounter had sparked something, setting in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything Emma and her team thought they knew about these intelligent, powerful creatures. The Selkie pushed through the worsening weather, its occupants unaware that their true test was yet to come. In the days that followed, the waters around the Shetland Islands would become a battleground, where human curiosity would clash with one of nature's most formidable predators, forever changing the lives of all involved. The pre-dawn light barely penetrated the thick fog that had settled over the North Sea as the Selkie cut through the choppy waters. Dr. Emma Sinclair stood on the deck, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, eyes straining to pierce the grayness surrounding them. The storm from the previous evening had passed, leaving in its wake an eerie stillness that set Emma's nerves on edge. "Anything yet, Dr. Sinclair?" Jack Thompson's voice broke through her reverie as he joined her at the railing, his own mug clutched tightly against the morning chill. Emma shook her head. "Nothing. But they're out there, Jack. I can feel it." As if on cue, a dark shape breached the surface about 100 meters off the port side. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the distinctive dorsal fin of an adult female orca. "Jack, get the others," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And bring me the long-range hydrophone." As Jack scrambled to alert the rest of the team, Emma kept her eyes fixed on the spot where the orca had surfaced. Moments later, it reappeared. Closer this time, Emma could make out the white eye patch, a stark contrast against the orca's black skin. Dr. Liam Chen was the first to join Emma, his usual calm demeanor tinged with excitement. "Is it the same pod from yesterday?" "I don't think so," Emma replied, accepting the hydrophone from Jack as he returned with Sarah Patel in tow. "This one's behaving differently, more deliberate." Emma lowered the hydrophone into the water, adjusting the headphones over her ears. For a moment there was nothing but the ambient noise of the sea. Then a series of clicks and whistles cut through the background static, causing Emma to wince at their intensity. "What is it?" Sarah asked, noting Emma's reaction. Emma removed the headphones, her brow furrowed. "It's unlike anything I've heard before." The vocalizations are much more complex, almost agitated. As the team huddled around the monitoring equipment, the female orca continued to circle the Selkie, each pass bringing it closer to the vessel. Captain McLeod's voice crackled over the intercom. "Dr. Sinclair, I don't like the look of this. That beastie's getting awful close." Emma keyed the intercom. "Understood, Captain. Let's hold position for now. This could be a unique behavioral observation." The fog was beginning to lift as the sun climbed higher, revealing a sea that stretched endlessly in every direction. The female orca had been joined by another, slightly smaller individual that Emma suspected might be an adolescent. "Look there!" Jack exclaimed, pointing to a spot several hundred meters beyond the circling orcas. "I think I see a calf." Emma raised her binoculars, focusing on the area Jack had indicated. Sure enough, a tiny dorsal fin broke the surface momentarily, before disappearing again. "My God," Emma breathed. "We're dealing with a mother and her offspring. This changes everything." Liam, who had been monitoring the underwater acoustics, suddenly straightened. "Dr. Sinclair, the vocalizations have changed. They're becoming more frequent and aggressive?" Before Emma could respond, the larger female orca suddenly dove, disappearing from view. The team held their breath, scanning the waters around the Selkie. "Where did it go?" Sarah whispered, her knuckles white as she gripped the railing. The answer came with shocking violence. Without warning, the massive orca burst from the water mere meters from the boat's starboard side. Time seemed to slow as Emma locked eyes with the creature mid-breach. In that frozen moment, she saw not the mindless killer of popular imagination, but an intelligent, powerful being radiating an unmistakable message. Threat. The orca crashed back into the sea, sending a spray of icy water over the deck and its stunned occupants. The impact rocked the Selkie, nearly knocking Emma off her feet. "Everyone inside, now!" Captain McLeod's voice boomed over the intercom, galvanizing the team into action. As they scrambled towards the safety of the cabin, Emma risked one last glance over her shoulder. The female orca had resurfaced, its dorsal fin slicing through the water as it circled back towards the ship. The message was clear. This was no longer a research expedition. It was a confrontation. Inside the cabin, chaos reigned. Equipment had been thrown from tables by the orca's initial impact, and alarms blared from multiple stations. "Status. Report," Emma called out, trying to bring order to the situation. Liam was the first to respond, his face pale as he looked up from a computer terminal. "Hull integrity is compromised, Dr. Sinclair. We're taking on water in the aft compartment. Bilge pumps are operational," Sarah added, her fingers flying over a keyboard. "But if we take another hit like that," she didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone knew the Selkie, for all its advanced research capabilities, was no match for a determined orca. Captain McLeod's voice cut through the tension. "Dr. Sinclair, we need to leave the area immediately. I'm plotting a course back to Lerwick." Emma felt torn. Every scientific instinct told her to stay, to observe this unprecedented behavior. But as the leader of the expedition, the safety of her team had to come first. "Do it, Captain," she said, the words tasting bitter in her mouth. "Get us out of here." As the Selkie's engines roared to life, Emma moved to the stern windows, watching as the distance between the ship and the orcas began to grow. The mother and adolescent were still visible, their dorsal fins standing like obsidian blades against the horizon. "I don't understand," Jack said, joining Emma at the window. "Why would they attack us? We weren't threatening them." Emma shook her head, her mind racing. "Orcas are highly intelligent social creatures, Jack. That mother wasn't attacking us. Out of simple aggression, she was defending her calf." "But we were just observing," Sarah interjected. "How could she perceive that as a threat?" Emma turned to face her team, her expression grave. "We're missing something. The unusual vocalizations, the aggressive behavior. There's more going on here than we realize." A sudden impact rocked the ship, causing everyone to stumble. Alarms blared with renewed urgency. "It's coming back!" Liam shouted, his eyes wide with disbelief as he stared at the sonar display. Emma rushed to the display, watching in horror as the large blip representing the mother orca closed in on their position with incredible speed. "Brace for impact," Captain McLeod's voice rang out. The second collision was even more violent than the first. The sound of rending metal filled the air as the orca's massive body slammed into the Selkie's hull. Emma was thrown to the floor, her head striking the edge of a desk. Through the haze of pain, she heard the panicked shouts of her team and the ominous groaning of the ship's stressed structure. As she struggled to her feet, Emma saw seawater beginning to seep through a crack in the cabin's floor. The realization hit her with terrifying clarity. They were no longer the observers. They had become prey. "Captain!" Emma shouted over the cacophony of alarms and rushing water. "We need to send out a distress signal." "Already done, Doctor," came the terse reply. But in these waters, help could be hours away. Emma's mind raced, searching for a solution. Their research, their equipment, their very lives hung in the balance. As another impact shook the ship, she made a decision that went against every scientific principle she held dear. "We need to fight back," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Not to harm them, but to drive them away." "Captain, do we have any underwater acoustic deterrents on board?" Captain McLeod's eyes widened in understanding. "Aye, we do, for emergency use only. But Dr. Sinclair, the effects on the orcas—" "Could be severe, I know," Emma finished, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. "But right now, it's them or us." As the team scrambled to deploy the acoustic deterrents, Emma returned to the window, watching the sleek black shapes circling ever closer. In that moment, she understood with perfect clarity the ancient fear of sailors confronting the vast, unforgiving power of the sea and its inhabitants. The Selkie limped forward, water spraying from its wounded hull, as the orcas continued their relentless pursuit. Emma Sinclair, marine biologist and lifelong advocate for these magnificent creatures, now found herself locked in a primal struggle for survival against the very animals she had dedicated her life to studying. As the first piercing sounds of the acoustic deterrents cut through the water, Emma silently prayed that they would be enough to save her team, and that the cost to the orcas wouldn't be too high. The true test of her expedition, she realized, was only just beginning. The harsh screech of the acoustic deterrents pierced the air, causing everyone aboard the Selkie to wince. Dr. Emma Sinclair watched with a mixture of hope and dread as the sound waves rippled through the water, invisible but potent. For a moment it seemed to work. The circling orcas paused in their relentless assault, their sleek bodies twisting beneath the waves as if in discomfort. Emma's heart leaped with cautious optimism. "It's working!" Jack shouted over the din. "They're backing off," but Emma's relief was short-lived. As she watched, the massive female orca, the mother, suddenly arched her body and dove deep. The younger orca followed suit, disappearing from view. "Don't celebrate yet," Emma warned, her eyes scanning the turbulent waters. "This isn't over." Captain McLeod's voice crackled over the intercom, tense but controlled. "Dr. Sinclair, we've stemmed the water intake for now, but the hull damage is severe. We need to make for shore immediately." Emma keyed the intercom. "Understood, Captain, but keep the deterrents running. I don't think our friends out there have given up just yet." As if in response to her words, a tremendous impact rocked. The Selkie, far more powerful than the previous strikes. The ship lurched violently to port, sending equipment and people sprawling across the deck. "What was that?" Sarah cried out, struggling to her feet. Liam, who had been monitoring the sonar, looked up with wide eyes. "They went under us. Mother, she rammed us from below." Emma's mind raced. The orca's behavior was unprecedented. Despite the painful acoustic deterrents, they were persisting in their attack with an almost unnatural determination. Another bone-jarring impact sent tremors through the ship. This time the sound of rending metal filled the air, followed by the alarming rush of water. "We've been breached!" Captain McLeod's voice was edged with panic now. "All hands, prepare to abandon ship." The next few moments were a blur of frantic activity. Emma and her team rushed to don life jackets and gather essential emergency gear. The ship's klaxon blared, its urgent wail mixing with the shouts of the crew and the relentless screeching of the deterrents. As Emma helped Sarah secure her life jacket, a horrifying realization struck her. "The life rafts," she gasped. "They're stored on the outer deck." Jack's face paled. "You mean we have to go out there? With them?" There was no need to specify who them was. Everyone's eyes turned to the windows, where the churning sea promised only death. Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself. We don't have a choice. It's either face them out there or go down with the ship. With trembling hands, Emma unlatched the cabin door. The sound of the deterrents, muffled inside, now hit them full force. The high-pitched wail was almost physically painful. Stay. Together! Emma shouted over the noise. Move fast, but carefully, we can't afford anyone going overboard. They emerged onto the deck, immediately buffeted by wind and spray. The Selkie was listing heavily to port now, making every step treacherous. On the slick surface, Liam spotted the life raft storage first. There, he pointed, his voice nearly lost in the cacophony. The team made their way across the deck, clinging to whatever handholds they could find. They were halfway to the life rafts when Emma saw a massive dark shape surging through the water directly towards the ship. Look out! She screamed, but her warning came too late. The mother orca slammed into the Selkie with bone-crushing force. The impact sent a shudder through the entire vessel. Emma lost her footing, sliding across the wet deck towards the railing. In a moment of pure terror, she felt herself going over. Her hands scrabbled desperately for purchase, finding nothing but air. Then suddenly a strong grip caught her wrist. I've got you! It was Jack, his face contorted with the effort of holding her. With Liam's help, they managed to pull Emma back onto the deck. She lay there for a moment, gasping, the taste of salt sharp in her mouth. Dr. Sinclair! Sarah's panicked voice cut through Emma's daze. The raft! It's gone! Emma's head snapped up. Where the life raft had been secured, there was now only empty space. The orca's impact had torn it free, sending it over the side. Before the full horror of their situation could sink in, Captain McLeod's voice boomed from nearby. There's another raft on the starboard side. Move now. They scrambled. Across the tilting deck, the ship groaning ominously beneath them. Emma's mind was a whirl of fear and disbelief. In all her years studying orcas, she had never encountered or even heard of such relentless aggression from these typically curious but non-threatening creatures. They reached the second life raft, and Liam and Jack began the process of deploying it. Emma and Sarah stood guard, their eyes scanning the turbulent waters for any sign of the orcas. There! Sarah suddenly pointed. About 50 meters out, a large dorsal fin cut through the waves, heading straight for them. Hurry! Emma urged, her heart pounding. The raft inflated with agonizing slowness. The approaching orca disappeared beneath the surface, but Emma knew it was still coming. She could feel it like an electric charge in the air. It's ready, Jack shouted. Everyone in. They piled into the raft, the rubber bottom scraping against the Selkie's deck. But before they could push off, a thunderous impact rocked the ship. The mother orca had struck again, this time hitting with such force that the Selkie lurched violently. Emma watched in horror as a massive crack appeared in the deck, water gushing through. The ship was literally breaking apart beneath them. Push off! Now! She screamed. With desperate strength, they shoved away from the dying ship. The raft teetered precariously as it hit the water, nearly capsizing in the rough seas. Emma looked back at the Selkie, watching as the proud research vessel began to slip beneath the waves. Captain McLeod appeared at the railing, tossing a waterproof bag towards them before diving into the churning sea. As they hauled the captain into the raft, Emma's eyes locked onto a sight that chilled her to her core. The mother orca had surfaced nearby, her massive body dwarfing their tiny raft. In that moment, Emma saw something in the orca's eye that she had never seen before in these animals, not curiosity, not indifference, but what looked unsettlingly like calculated intent. The orca dove, disappearing beneath the waves. The survivors in the raft held their breath, eyes darting in all directions, waiting for the next attack. Why? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Why are they doing this? Emma shook her head, her scientific mind struggling to make sense of the orca's behavior. I don't know, but whatever the reason, we're in their world now, and they're not done with us yet. As if to emphasize her words, a large shadow passed beneath the raft, the water bulging slightly as the massive predator glided by just feet below them. In that moment, as the remains of the Selkie disappeared beneath the waves and the orcas circled their tiny raft, Emma Sinclair realized that their ordeal was far from over. The North Sea stretched endlessly around them, cold and unforgiving. and somewhere in its depths a mother orca was preparing for her next move in this unexpected battle between species. The acoustic deterrents, their last line of defense, fell silent as the Selkie sank, leaving only the sound of wind, waves, and the occasional exhalation of the circling orcas. As rain began to fall, mixing with the sea spray, Emma pulled her team close, their eyes locked on the dark fins cutting through the water around them. The attack had ended, but the true test of survival was only beginning. The raft bobbed precariously on the choppy North Sea, its 5 occupants huddled together against the biting wind and spray. Dr. Emma Sinclair's eyes darted constantly between the horizon and the water surrounding them, searching for any sign of the orcas that had destroyed their ship. "We need to take stock of our situation," Emma said, her voice hoarse from shouting over the wind. "Captain McLeod, what supplies did you manage to bring?" The captain, his salt and pepper hair plastered to his forehead, pulled the waterproof bag closer. "Emergency rations, a flare gun with 3 flares, a handheld radio, and a basic first aid kit," he reported, his Scottish brogue thicker than usual under the stress. Jack Thompson, the young postdoc, looked up from where he was examining the raft. "The raft has a small repair kit and some fishing line, but that's about it," he added. Sarah Patel hugged herself tightly, shivering. "How long before someone realizes we're missing?" "The Selkie was due to check in with the research station this evening," Liam Chen answered, his usually calm demeanor strained. "When we don't report, they'll start searching. But in these waters..." He didn't need to finish the thought. They all knew the vastness of the North Sea and the challenges it presented to any rescue operation. A sudden movement in the water caused everyone to freeze. About 50 meters away, a large dorsal fin broke the surface, circling slowly before disappearing again. "They're still out there," Emma murmured, a mix of fear and scientific fascination in her voice. "But why haven't they attacked the raft?" Captain McLeod's weathered face was grim. "Perhaps they're waiting for us to weaken. Orcas are known for their patience when hunting." As if to punctuate his words, a loud exhalation sounded nearby, followed by the sight of the mother orca's massive body rolling just beneath the surface, her white eye patch clearly visible as she regarded the raft. Sarah let out a small whimper. "We're going to die out here, aren't we?" Emma turned to her, gripping her shoulders firmly. "No, we're not. We're trained scientists and an experienced sea captain. We have supplies, and people will be looking for us. We just need to stay calm and think." Just then, a sharp crack echoed across the water. Everyone turned to see a thin stream of water spurting into the raft from a small tear in the floor. "Damn it!" Jack exclaimed, quickly moving to cover the hole with his hand. "The attack must have damaged the raft more than we thought." Liam was already reaching for the repair kit. "We need to patch this now before it gets worse." As Liam worked on the repair, Emma's mind raced. They needed a plan, not just to fix the raft, but to survive long enough for rescue to arrive. "Captain," she said, turning to McLeod, "can you get a signal on that radio?" The captain shook, his head grimly. "I've been trying. Nothing but static so far. We might be out of range or the storm could be interfering." Emma nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Keep trying. Jack, Sarah, start rationing the supplies. We need to make them last as long as possible." As the team busied themselves with their tasks, Emma kept watch. The orcas were still circling, their dorsal fins occasionally breaking the surface. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being studied, assessed. Hours passed, each moment a struggle against the elements and their own growing fatigue and fear. The patch on the raft held, but everyone knew it was a temporary solution at best. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long shadows across the waves, Emma made a decision. "We need to try to paddle," she announced. "Sitting here waiting for rescue is too risky. We're drifting further out to sea and the raft could give out at any moment." Captain McLeod nodded in agreement. "Aye, but which direction? Without proper navigation tools, we could end up even more lost." Emma pointed to where the sun was setting. "West. The Shetland Islands are west of our last known position. It's our best chance." Using their hands and some improvised paddles, made from pieces of the raft's equipment, they began to move slowly through the water. It was exhausting work, made all the more terrifying by the knowledge that beneath them, the orcas continued their silent vigil. As night fell, bringing with it a bone-chilling cold, they took turns paddling and resting. Emma found herself on watch, staring into the darkness, straining to hear any sound that might indicate the orcas were approaching. A soft splash to her left made her heart race. She turned, expecting to see a massive black and white form surging towards them. Instead, she saw something that made her gasp. "Everyone, wake up!" she hissed urgently. "Look!" Groggy and confused. The others stirred, following Emma's pointing finger. There, not 20 meters from the raft, the water was alive with bioluminescence. Streaks of ethereal blue light darted beneath the surface, creating a mesmerizing display. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered, momentarily forgetting their dire situation, but Emma's scientific mind was already racing. "It's not just beautiful, it's useful. Bioluminescent plankton often gather near coastlines. We might be closer to land than we thought." This realization injected new energy into the group. They paddled with renewed vigor, following the trail of living light. As they moved, Emma noticed something else. The bioluminescence was revealing more than just their potential proximity to land. In the glowing water, she could make out large, torpedo-shaped forms moving beneath them. "The orcas," she breathed. "They're still with us." Indeed. As they watched, they could see the outline of the mother orca gliding gracefully through the glowing water, her calf close beside her. It was a sight both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "Why haven't they attacked again?" Jack wondered aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma shook her head, her scientific curiosity warring with her survival instinct. "I don't know. This behavior, it's unprecedented. It's almost as if they're escorting us." Captain McLeod scoffed. "Escorting us to our doom, more like." But Emma wasn't so sure. Something about the orca's behavior nagged at her. There was an intelligence, a purpose to their actions that she couldn't explain. As the night wore on, the bioluminescence began to fade, leaving them once again in darkness. But Emma's hope had been rekindled. They had a direction now, a purpose beyond mere survival. Just before dawn, as the first hints of light began to touch the eastern sky, Liam spotted something on the horizon. "There!" he shouted, pointing. "I think I see land." Everyone strained their eyes, hardly daring to believe it. But as the light grew stronger, the unmistakable silhouette of cliffs began to take shape in the distance. Their joy, however, was short-lived. A familiar dark fin broke the surface nearby, followed by another and another. The orcas, which had kept their distance through the night, were suddenly closing in. "They're hurting us," Emma realized with a start. "They're driving us towards the shore." The implications of this were staggering. If true, it suggested a level of planning and intention that went far beyond what was known about orca behavior. As the shore grew closer, the waves became more treacherous, threatening to capsize their small raft at any moment. The orca's fins were visible on all sides now, hemming them in, giving them no choice but to head straight for the rocky coast. "We're going to crash," Sarah cried out as a particularly large wave lifted the raft, sending it hurtling towards the jagged rocks. "Everyone, brace yourselves," Captain McLeod shouted. The impact when it came was violent. The raft slammed into the rocks, the fabric tearing with a sickening sound. Cold seawater rushed in as the occupants were thrown clear, plunging into the churning surf. Emma gasped as the icy water enveloped her, fighting to keep her head above the waves. Through the spray and foam, she could see her teammates struggling similarly, being battered against the rocks. With the last of her strength, Emma struck out for the shore, her arms and legs burning with the effort. As she neared the beach, a large wave caught her, sending her tumbling through the water. For a moment, she was sure this was the end. Then, incredibly, she felt something solid beneath her, pushing her upward. Through her blurred vision, she caught a glimpse of sleek black skin and a white eye patch. The mother orca, supporting her, guiding her to shore. As Emma's feet finally touched the sandy bottom, she turned to look back at the sea. The orcas were there, their massive bodies silhouetted against the rising sun. For a brief moment, the mother orca's eye met Emma's, and in that gaze, she saw something that would haunt her for years to come. Not aggression or hunger, but an intelligence and purpose she couldn't begin to comprehend. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, the orcas turned and swam away, leaving Emma and her battered team on the shore of an unknown island, alive but forever changed by their encounter with these mysterious predators of the deep. As Emma collapsed onto the sand, coughing up seawater, she knew that their ordeal was far from over. But for now they were alive, and the orcas' strange behavior had given her a mystery that her scientific mind was already burning to solve. The 5 survivors of the Selkie, huddled together on the rocky beach, their bodies racked with shivers from the bone-chilling water and the biting wind. As the adrenaline of their near-death experience began to wear off, the full weight of their situation settled upon them like a heavy blanket. Dr. Emma Sinclair pushed herself up on shaky arms, spitting out sand and seawater. Her eyes scanned the group, taking quick stock of their condition. "Is everyone all right? Any serious injuries?" Captain McLeod winced as he sat up, clutching his left arm. "Think I've dislocated my shoulder," he grunted through gritted teeth. Liam Chen was already moving to the captain's side, his medical training kicking in. "Let me take a look," he said, gently probing the injury. Sarah Patel and Jack Thompson seemed physically unharmed, but their eyes were wide with shock and residual fear. Sarah hugged her knees to her chest, rocking slightly. They saved us," she whispered, her gaze fixed on the now calm sea. "The orcas. They guided us here. Why?" Emma shook her head, her scientific mind already racing to make sense of the unprecedented behavior they had witnessed. "I don't know, Sarah, but right now we need to focus on immediate survival. Jack, can you help me salvage what we can from the raft?" As Jack nodded and stumbled to his feet, a sharp cry of pain cut through the air. Liam had just popped Captain McLeod's shoulder back into place. "Sorry, Captain," Liam apologized, reaching for what remained of their first aid kit. "It'll be sore for a while, but at least it's back in socket." Emma and Jack returned from the waterline, arms full of sodden supplies. "It's not much," Emma reported grimly. "Most of our rations are ruined. The radio's waterlogged. We've got 1 flare left, the emergency blankets, and some basic tools." Captain McLeod struggled to his feet, cradling his injured arm. "We need to find shelter and fresh water," he said, his eyes scanning the rugged coastline. "Night will be falling soon, and if we don't get warm and dry, hypothermia will be a real concern." Emma nodded in agreement. "All right, let's move inland. There might be a cave or some kind of natural shelter in those cliffs." As they gathered their meager supplies and began to trek across the rocky beach, Emma couldn't shake the image of the mother orca's eye meeting hers in that final moment. There had been an unmistakable intelligence there, a purposefulness that defied everything she thought she knew about these creatures. The group moved slowly, their bodies battered and exhausted. The terrain was unforgiving, a mix of jagged rocks and coarse sand that seemed to stretch endlessly before them. The sun, now high in the sky, beat down mercilessly, a stark contrast to the chill that still clung to their wet clothes. After what felt like hours but was likely only 45 minutes, Liam called out from where he had taken point. "I think I see something. There's an opening in the cliffs up ahead." Renewed energy surged through the group as they quickened their pace. As they drew closer, they saw that Liam was right. A dark opening yawned in the face of the cliff, promising shelter from the elements. "Wait," Emma cautioned as they approached the cave entrance. "We need to be careful. There could be animals inside." Captain McLeod picked up a sturdy piece of driftwood, wielding it like a club with his good arm. "I'll go first," he said gruffly. "You lot wait here." The group held their breath as the captain disappeared into the darkness. Long moments passed before his voice echoed out to them. "It's clear, and there's more. Come see." They filed into the cave, their eyes slowly adjusting to the gloom. As they moved deeper, a faint gurgling sound reached their ears. "Is that?" Sarah began, hope creeping into her voice for the first time since the shipwreck. "Water," Emma confirmed, her flashlight beam illuminating a small stream trickling down the cave wall and pooling in a natural basin. Fresh water. A collective sigh of relief swept through the group. They had shelter and water, 2 critical elements for survival secured. As night fell, they gathered around a small fire Jack had managed to start using their meager supplies and some dry driftwood. The dancing flames cast long shadows on the cave walls, and the constant drip of water echoed in the background. "We should take stock of our situation," Emma said, her voice cutting through the somber silence that had fallen over the group. "What do we know? And what do we need to do?" Liam spoke up first. "We're on an island, but we don't know which one. Could be one of the Shetlands, or we might have drifted further. Without the radio or GPS, it's impossible to say for sure. The research station will have noticed we're missing by now," Jack added. "They'll have alerted the Coast Guard. Someone will be looking for us." Captain McLeod nodded grimly. "Aye, but the North Sea is vast, and we've drifted far from our last known position. It could be days before they find us, if they do at all." A heavy silence fell over the group as the captain's words sank in. Sarah huddled closer to the fire, her voice barely above a whisper. "What about the orcas? Do you think they'll come back?" Emma shook her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I don't know, Sarah. Their behavior was unprecedented. In all my years studying marine mammals, I've never seen or heard of anything like it. They weren't just hunting us," Liam mused. "If they wanted us dead, we'd be at the bottom of the sea right now." Jack leaned forward, his face illuminated by the flickering firelight. "So what was it then? Why did they destroy our ship, only to guide us to safety?" Emma sighed, running a hand through her salt-crusted hair. "I wish I knew. It's as if they were testing us somehow. Or maybe trying to communicate something we couldn't understand." "Communicate?" Captain McLeod scoffed. "They're animals, Dr. Sinclair. Intelligent, aye, but still animals." Emma's eyes flashed, with a mix of frustration and excitement. "But that's just it, Captain. We've always underestimated the cognitive abilities of cetaceans. What if there's more to their intelligence than we've ever realized?" As the night wore on, the conversation drifted from scientific speculation to more immediate concerns. They rationed out what little food they had salvaged, made plans for exploring the island in the morning, and set up a watch rotation. Emma took the first watch, sitting at the mouth of the cave and staring out at the moonlit sea. The events of the past day played over and over in her mind, each replay raising more questions than answers. Around midnight, as she was about to wake Liam for the next watch, a movement on the water caught her eye. She blinked, certain she must be hallucinating from exhaustion. But no. There it was again. A dorsal fin, unmistakable even in the dim light, broke the surface far offshore. Then another and another. The orcas were back. Emma's heart raced as she watched the pod circle slowly, their movements almost languid in the calm night sea. The mother, she was certain it was the same one, surfaced closest to shore, her exhalation clearly audible in the still night air. For a long moment, orca and human regarded each other across the expanse of water. Emma felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold night air. There was purpose in that gaze, an intelligence that seemed to peer into her very soul. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the orcas dove and vanished beneath the waves. Emma sat frozen, her mind whirling. She knew she should wake the others, tell them what she had seen, but something held her back. This felt personal somehow, a message meant for her alone. As the first light of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, Emma finally roused herself from her vigil. She looked out at the now empty sea, a mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through her veins. Whatever game the orcas were playing, whatever test they were conducting, it wasn't over. And Emma was determined to see it through, to unlock the mystery behind their bizarre behavior. Little did she know the true challenge and the true danger was only just beginning. The dawn broke over the island, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. Dr. Emma Sinclair stood at the mouth of the cave, her eyes scanning the horizon. She hadn't slept, her mind too full of the mysterious nocturnal visit from the orcas. As the others began to stir behind her, she took a deep breath, steeling herself for the day ahead. "Any sign of rescue?" Captain McLeod's gruff voice broke through her reverie. Emma shook her head. "Nothing yet, but it's early." The captain joined her at the cave entrance, his injured arm held close to his body. "Aye, that it is. But we can't just sit here waiting. We need to be proactive." As if on cue, a distant sound caught their attention. At first it was barely perceptible over the crash of waves on the shore, but it grew steadily louder. a rhythmic thump-thump-thump that could only be one thing. "Helicopter!" Jack shouted, scrambling out of the cave. "Hey, over here!" The rest of the team quickly joined him on the beach, waving their arms frantically as the helicopter came into view. It was still far off, but the sight of it sent a surge of hope through the group. "The flare," Emma said urgently. "We need to use the flare." Liam was already fumbling with the flare gun, his hands shaking with a mix of excitement and desperation. He raised the gun skyward and pulled the trigger. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a loud pop, the flare shot into the air, trailing red smoke against the morning sky. Come on," Sarah murmured, her eyes fixed on the approaching aircraft. "See us, please see us." The helicopter continued its approach, growing larger by the second. For a moment, it seemed to be heading directly for them. Then, to their horror, it began to bank away. "No!" Jack shouted, his voice breaking. "We're here! Come back!" But the helicopter continued its turn, the sound of its rotors fading as it disappeared behind a rocky outcropping. A heavy silence fell over the group. The hope that had buoyed them moments ago evaporated, leaving behind a leaden despair. They didn't see us," Sarah said, her voice small and disbelieving. Emma's mind raced. They had been so close. She refused to let this setback defeat them. "Okay," she said, injecting as much confidence into her voice as she could muster. "They might not have seen us, but this proves that search and rescue operations are underway. We're not forgotten." Captain McLeod nodded grimly. "Dr. Sinclair's right. But we can't rely solely on being found. We need to improve our chances." "How?" Liam asked, still staring at the spot where the helicopter had vanished. "We need to make ourselves more visible," Emma said, her scientific mind already formulating a plan. "A signal fire, something big enough to be seen from the air." Jack's eyes lit up. "I've got an idea. The raft. What's left of it? The material is bright orange. If we could spread it out on the beach, it might catch a pilot's eye." "Good thinking, Jack," Emma said approvingly. "Liam, Sarah, can you two start gathering wood for a signal fire? The drier, the better. Captain, if you're up for it, I'd like you to scout the high ground. See if you can find a good vantage point where we might spot approaching aircraft or ships." As the team dispersed to their tasks, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were doing something, taking control of their fate as best they could. She joined Jack in salvaging what they could of the raft, her mind drifting back to the events that had brought them here. The orca's behavior still puzzled her. As a scientist, she was trained to observe, to analyze, to find patterns in seemingly random events. But this defied explanation. "Dr. Sinclair?" Jack's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, Jack. What is it?" The young researcher hesitated, his hands fidgeting with a piece of the raft. "Last night when you were on watch, did you see anything unusual?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. Had he seen the orcas too? "What do you mean?" Jack shrugged, looking embarrassed. "It's probably nothing, I thought I heard something. Whale song, maybe. But different. I don't know. It was probably just a dream." Emma studied him for a moment, weighing her words carefully. "Jack, in our line of work, we're trained to trust our observations. If you heard something, it's worth noting. Can you describe it?" As Jack began to detail what he'd heard, Emma's excitement grew. His description matched perfectly with the vocalizations they'd recorded just before the attack on the Selkie. Their conversation was interrupted by a shout from the cliffs. "Dr. Sinclair, everyone, you need to see this." It was Captain McLeod, waving urgently from a rocky outcropping above the beach. The team quickly made their way up the steep path, their curiosity overriding their exhaustion. As they crested the hill, they saw what had caused the captain's excitement. Spread out before them was not the endless expanse of ocean they had expected, but a view of a larger landmass in the distance. "Is that—" Sarah began, hope creeping into her voice. "The Shetland mainland," Captain McLeod confirmed. "We must be on one of the outer islands." The realization sent a ripple of excitement through the group. They weren't as isolated as they had feared. Civilization and rescue might be closer than they had dared hope. But Emma's scientific mind was already racing ahead, connecting dots that had seemed disparate before. "The orcas," she said, almost to herself. "They didn't just save us. They brought us here specifically." The others turned to her, confusion evident on their faces. "What do you mean, Dr. Sinclair?" Liam asked. Emma's eyes were alight with the thrill of discovery. "Think about it. They could have driven us to any shore, any island, but they chose this one. The one closest to the mainland. It's as if they wanted to make sure we had the best chance of survival and rescue." "But why?" Sarah asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Before Emma could respond, a familiar sound reached their ears. The steady thump, thump, thump of helicopter rotors growing louder by the second. "There!" Jack shouted, pointing to a spot just over the horizon. A small dark shape was rapidly growing larger, heading directly for their island. This time there was no mistake. The helicopter, a Coast Guard rescue chopper, flew straight towards them, hovering over the beach where they had laid out the bright orange remains of the raft. As the aircraft began its descent, kicking up a maelstrom of sand and seawater, Emma felt a complex mix of emotions wash over her. Relief, certainly. Their ordeal was coming to an end. But also a strange sense of unfinished business. The mystery of the orca's behavior remained unsolved, a puzzle that she knew would haunt her long after they left this island. The rescue team worked efficiently, checking each survivor for injuries and preparing them for transport. As Emma was helped into the helicopter, she took one last look at the sea. There, just for a moment, she thought she saw a familiar dorsal fin break the surface far offshore. But before she could be sure, it was gone, leaving her to wonder if it had been real or just a product of her overtaxed imagination. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying them to safety, Emma's mind was already racing ahead. She knew that her experience here would change the course of her research, perhaps even her entire understanding of cetacean intelligence. But more than that, she felt as though she had been part of something profound, something that challenged the very boundaries between human and animal consciousness. The island receded beneath them, growing smaller until it was just another speck in the vast expanse of the North Sea. But for Emma and her team, its impact would be felt for years to come. They had come seeking to study orcas, but in the end, it seemed the orcas had studied them, and the implications of that revelation were both thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. As the mainland came into view, Emma closed her eyes, exhaustion finally overtaking her. But even in her dreams, she saw those intelligent eyes watching her, heard those haunting vocalizations. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that this was not the end of her encounter with the orcas of the North Sea. It was only the beginning. The helicopter touched down at Sumburg Airport, where a team of medical professionals was waiting. As Emma and her team were ushered into the small terminal building, they were immediately surrounded by a flurry of activity: paramedics checking vitals, police officers taking preliminary statements, and anxious research station staff peppering them with questions. Through it all, Emma's mind kept returning to the orcas. She knew she needed to report their behavior to start the process of analyzing this unprecedented event, but a part of her hesitated. How could she explain what had happened without sounding crazy? How could she convey the intelligence, the purposefulness she had sensed in those creatures? As a paramedic wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and pressed a cup of hot tea into her hands, Emma overheard Captain McLeod giving his statement to a police officer. And then the orcas just disappeared. Left us on that beach like they were dropping off passengers, the captain was saying, his voice gruff with disbelief. The officer's pen paused over his notepad. "Orcas, you say? And they helped you?" Emma could see the doubt in the officer's eyes, the subtle shift in his posture that suggested he was humoring what he perceived as a trauma-induced delusion. She knew then that the true challenge was just beginning. It wasn't just about surviving the ordeal. It was about making sure their experience was understood and taken seriously. As the day wore on and the initial flurry of activity settled, Emma found herself in a quiet corner of the airport, staring out at the runway. The events of the past few days played over and over in her mind, each replay revealing new details, new questions. "Dr. Sinclair?" Emma turned to see Sarah approaching, a tentative smile on her face. "How are you holding up?" Emma asked, gesturing for the younger woman to join her. Sarah shrugged, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm not sure. It all feels so Unreal. Like a dream, you know? Emma nodded. I know exactly what you mean. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as another rescue helicopter touched down, no doubt returning from the ongoing search efforts. Dr. Sinclair? Sarah began hesitantly. What happens now? With our research, I mean. After what we've seen, what we've experienced. Emma took a deep breath, considering her words carefully. Now, Sarah, we have work to do. Important work. What we experienced out there, it changes everything. Our understanding of orca behavior, of cetacean intelligence, it's all been turned on its head. She turned to face her young colleague, her eyes bright with determination. We need to document everything, every detail, every observation, and then we need to go back out there. Sarah's eyes widened. Back? But after what happened? Especially after what happened, Emma said firmly. Sarah, we've been given a unique opportunity. Those orcas showed us something extraordinary. We owe it to them, to science, to ourselves, to follow up on it. As she spoke, Emma could see the spark of scientific curiosity reigniting in Sarah's eyes. It was the same spark that had driven Emma throughout her career, the insatiable need to understand, to discover. It won't be easy, Emma continued. We'll face skepticism, doubt. Some will say we imagined it all, that it was just the stress of the shipwreck playing tricks on our minds. But we know what we saw, what we experienced, and we owe it to ourselves and to those incredible creatures to find out why. Sarah nodded slowly, a new resolve settling over her features. You're right. Of course you're right. Where do we start? Emma smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose flooding through her. We start by telling our story, all of it, no matter how incredible it may seem. And then we go back to the sea. Because something tells me, Sarah, that those orcas aren't done with us yet. Not by a long shot. As they turned back to rejoin the others, Emma felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The journey ahead would be challenging, fraught with obstacles both scientific and personal, but she knew with an unshakable certainty that it was a journey she had to take. The orcas had shown them something profound, something that challenged the very boundaries of human understanding. And Emma was determined to unravel that mystery, no matter where it might lead. The North Sea stretched out before them, vast and inscrutable, holding its secrets close. But Emma Sinclair was ready for the challenge. The orcas had opened a door to a new world of understanding, and she was determined to step through it, wherever it might lead. The sun had barely crested the horizon when Dr. Emma Sinclair stepped onto the deck of the research vessel, Morrigan. The name, chosen for the Celtic goddess of fate and destiny, seemed fitting for their mission. It had been 3 months since their harrowing encounter with the orcas, and now they were back, determined to unravel the mystery that had nearly cost them their lives. Emma breathed in the crisp sea air, her eyes scanning the choppy waters of the North Sea. The events of that fateful day played in her mind like a vivid dream. The attack, the rescue, the inexplicable behavior of the orcas. She had replayed those moments countless times, each recollection raising more questions than answers. Dr. Sinclair? Jack Thompson's voice broke through her reverie. The teams assembled in the lab. We're ready when you are. Emma nodded, giving the horizon one last searching look before following Jack below deck. The Morrigan was larger than the Selkie had been, equipped with state-of-the-art research equipment and enhanced safety features. No expense had been spared for this expedition, not after the story of their last voyage had captured the imagination of the scientific community and the public alike. In the ship's laboratory, Emma found her team gathered around a large holographic display. Sarah Patel, Liam Chen, and Captain McLeod, all survivors of the Selkie incident, stood alongside new faces, experts brought in to bolster their research capabilities. Good morning, everyone, Emma began, her voice steady despite the nervous energy thrumming through her veins. As you know, we're not just here to study orca behavior. We're here to understand what happened 3 months ago, and why. She gestured to the display, which showed a map of their current location and the surrounding waters. We're approaching the area where we encountered the pod. Our priority is to locate them, but remember, Safety is paramount. We're not taking any unnecessary risks. Dr. Olivia Reeves, a cetacean communication specialist who had joined their team, spoke up. Dr. Sinclair, I've been analyzing the audio recordings from the Selkie incident. The vocalizations we captured, they're unlike anything in our databases. The complexity, the patterns, it's as if they were trying to communicate something specific. Emma nodded, unsurprised. That aligns with what we experienced. Olivia, I want you monitoring all acoustic data. If you hear anything similar to those recordings, I want to know immediately. As the team dispersed to their stations, Captain McLeod approached Emma. His left arm, still not fully recovered from the dislocation, was held close to his body. Dr. Sinclair, a word? They moved to a quiet corner of the lab. The captain's weathered face was etched with concern. I know we've been over this, but I need to ask one more time. Are you sure about this? Those creatures nearly killed us. Emma met his gaze steadily. They also saved us, Captain. We need to understand why, but I understand your concerns. If at any point you feel the safety of this ship and crew is at risk, you have my full authority to abort the mission. McLeod nodded, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. As the day wore on, anticipation built among the crew. Every splash, every dark shape in the water sent a ripple of excitement through the ship. But as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, they had yet to encounter any orcas. Emma stood on the observation deck, frustration gnawing at her. Had they miscalculated? Were the orcas avoiding them? Dr. Sinclair, Sarah's voice crackled over the intercom. We've got something on the hydrophones. Emma raced to the lab, her heart pounding. The team was clustered around Olivia's station, listening intently to the sounds emanating from the speakers. It started as a series of clicks and whistles, not unusual for orca vocalizations. But then the pattern changed, becoming more complex, more rhythmic. Emma felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She'd heard this before in the final moments before the Selkie was attacked. It's them, she breathed. The same pod. Olivia's fingers flew over her keyboard, analyzing the sounds in real time. The structure of these vocalizations, it's almost like language, but more than that, it's like they're calling to us. Before Emma could respond, Captain McLeod's voice boomed over the intercom. All hands on deck, we've got a visual. The team rushed to the deck, binoculars, and cameras at the ready. There, barely 100 meters from the ship, a massive dorsal fin broke the surface. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She'd know that fin anywhere. It was the mother orca, the one that had led the attack on the Selkie, and then, inexplicably, guided them to safety. As they watched, more fins appeared. 5, 10, 15. The entire pod was surfacing, surrounding the Morrigan, in a loose circle. My God, Liam whispered. It's like they were waiting for us. Emma's mind raced. This behavior was unprecedented. Wild orcas didn't seek out ships, didn't surround them like this. What were they doing? Suddenly, the water directly in front of the ship erupted as the mother orca breached, her massive body launching clear of the water before crashing back down in a spray of foam. The display was repeated by other members of the pod, a choreographed performance that left the humans on deck speechless. They're trying to communicate, Emma said, her voice filled with awe and excitement. Olivia, are you getting this? Every second, Olivia confirmed over the intercom. Dr. Sinclair, the vocalizations are changing. They're becoming more intense, more directed. As if in response to Olivia's words, the orca's behavior shifted. The breaching stopped, and the pod began to move with clear purpose. To Emma's astonishment, they seemed to be herding the Morrigan, nudging it gently but firmly in a specific direction. Captain, Emma called out, let them guide us. Cut the engines and let us drift. McLeod looked at her incredulously. Doctor, are you sure? We don't know where they're taking us. Emma met his gaze, her determination evident. No, we don't. But this is why we're here, Captain. To understand, to learn. We need to trust them. After a moment's hesitation, McLeod nodded and gave the order to cut the engines. The Morrigan drifted silently, guided by the pod of orcas. Hours passed, tension building with each passing minute. The orcas remained close, their presence both reassuring and unnerving. As night fell, Emma ordered floodlights to be used sparingly, not wanting to disturb their cetacean guides. It was just past midnight when Liam, who had been monitoring their position, called out, "Dr. Sinclair, we're approaching a small island. It's not on our charts." Emma rushed to his side, staring at the navigation display in disbelief. How could there be an uncharted island in these waters? As they drew closer, the outline of the island became visible in the moonlight. It was small, barely more than a rocky outcropping, but at its center stood something that made Emma's heart race. A structure, clearly artificial, rising from the highest point of the island. "What in God's name is that?" Captain McLeod muttered, peering through his binoculars. Before anyone could respond, the orca's behavior changed again. The pod spread out, forming a protective circle around the Morrigan as it drifted closer to the mysterious island. Emma made a decision. "Captain, prepare a small team to go ashore. Whatever that structure is, I think it's what the orcas wanted us to find." Within minutes, Emma, Jack, and Dr. Reeves were in a small inflatable boat, making their way towards the island. The orcas followed, their dorsal fins cutting through the water on either side of the boat like an honor guard. As they neared the shore, Emma's flashlight beam caught something that made her gasp. There, etched into the rock face near the water line, were symbols, complex swirling patterns that seemed to glow faintly in the light. "Are those bioluminescent?" Jack asked, his voice filled with wonder. Olivia leaned in for a closer look. "They're not just random patterns, there's a structure to them, a rhythm. It's almost like the orca vocalizations," Emma finished, her mind reeling with the implications. They beached the boat and made their way up a narrow path towards the structure they had seen from the ship. As they drew closer, Emma's scientific mind struggled to process what she was seeing. The building, if it could be called that, seemed to be a fusion of organic and artificial materials. Smooth, curved surfaces reminiscent of a whale's flank, blended seamlessly with what looked like advanced technology. "What is this place?" Jack whispered, his voice filled with a mix of awe and trepidation. Emma shook her head, at a loss for words. Nothing in her years of scientific training had prepared her for this. As they approached the structure, a section of the wall seemed to ripple and then part, revealing an entrance. "It's inviting us in," Olivia said, her voice barely audible. Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Remember why we're here," she said to her team. "To understand. Whatever this is, the orcas led us here for a reason. We need to see it through." With cautious steps, they entered the structure. The interior was dimly lit by the same bioluminescent material they had seen on the rocks outside. As their eyes adjusted, they found themselves in a large circular chamber. The walls were covered in the same swirling symbols, pulsing gently with light. In the center of the chamber stood what could only be described as a control panel, its surface a mix of organic curves and what looked like highly advanced touch interfaces. As they approached the panel, the symbols on the walls began to pulse more rapidly, and a low hum filled the air. Suddenly, the chamber was filled with a holographic display, showing images of the Earth's oceans, of orcas, of other marine life, and, to their shock, of humans. "It's some kind of archive," Olivia breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the swirling images. A record of the relationship between humans and the ocean. The display shifted, showing scenes that made Emma's blood run cold. Whaling ships, oil spills, coral reefs bleaching and dying. But then it changed again, showing conservation efforts, marine protected areas, scientists working to understand and protect ocean life. As they watched, transfixed, a new sound filled the chamber. The unmistakable vocalizations of orcas, but layered and complex in a way they had never heard before. To Emma's astonishment, she found she could almost understand it, as if the meaning was hovering just at the edge of comprehension. "They're talking to us," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "All of this, the attack on our ship guiding us to safety, bringing us here. It was all to show us this." Jack looked at her, his face a mix of confusion and awe. "But why? What are they trying to tell us?" As if in response to his question, the holographic display shifted one final time. It showed the Earth, its oceans teeming with life, But then that life began to fade, the oceans becoming empty and lifeless. Then the image rewound, showing the oceans restored, vibrant and healthy, with humans and marine life existing in harmony. The message was clear. It was a warning and a plea for help. Emma felt tears in her eyes as the magnitude of what they had discovered washed over her. This wasn't just about orca behavior or cetacean intelligence. This was something far bigger, far more profound. "They're not just animals," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "They're guardians, custodians of the ocean, and they're reaching out to us because they can't protect it alone anymore." As the realization settled over the team, the chamber fell silent. The holograms faded, leaving them in the soft glow of the bioluminescent symbols. Outside, they could hear the calls of the orcas waiting patiently in the waters around the island. Emma took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. She knew that what they had discovered here would change everything, their understanding of marine life, of intelligence, of humanity's place in the world's oceans. But she also knew that it was just the beginning. "Come on," she said to her team, her voice filled with newfound purpose. "We have work to do." As they stepped out of the structure, Emma paused, looking out over the moonlit sea. In the distance, she could see the Morrigan, and beyond it, the sleek forms of the orcas, moving through the water. A profound sense of responsibility settled over her. The orcas had chosen them, had trusted them with this knowledge. Now it was up to them to prove worthy of that trust. With a mixture of determination and awe, Emma and her team made their way back to their boat. As they pushed off from the shore, the mother orca surfaced nearby, her intelligent eye meeting Emma's gaze. In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. A promise, a partnership, a shared commitment to the future of the oceans. As they motored back to the Morrigan, Emma's mind was already racing with plans. They would need to document everything, to find a way to share this discovery with the world in a way that would be understood and believed. It would be challenging, perhaps the greatest challenge of her career. But as she looked at the determined faces of her team, at the orcas gliding gracefully alongside their boat, she knew they were equal to the task. The dawn was breaking as they reached the ship, the first rays of sunlight painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. It felt fitting, the dawn of a new day and the dawn of a new era in humanity's relationship with the ocean and its inhabitants. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Emma knew that this night had changed everything. The final stand of the orcas had become a new beginning, a call to action that would resonate far beyond the waters of the North Sea. The fluorescent lights of the conference room buzzed faintly as Dr. Emma Sinclair stood before the assembled panel. Her eyes, rimmed with dark circles from countless sleepless nights, scanned the faces of the scientists, government officials, and marine conservation experts gathered before her. The weight of the past 6 months, the discoveries, the struggles, the moments of doubt and triumph, seemed to press down on her shoulders. Dr. Sinclair, the committee chair, a stern-faced woman with steel-gray hair, leaned forward. "You've presented us with an extraordinary account. I think I speak for everyone here when I say we're having difficulty reconciling your claims with our current understanding of cetacean behavior and intelligence." Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself. She had anticipated this response, had prepared for it, but the reality of facing such skepticism was still daunting. "I understand your reservations," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "What we experienced, what we discovered, goes beyond anything in our current scientific framework. But I assure you, every word of our report is true." A murmur rippled through the room. Emma could see the doubt, the disbelief in many of their eyes, but she also saw curiosity, a hunger for understanding that gave her hope. Dr. Sinclair, another panel member, a renowned marine biologist, spoke up. "You're asking us to believe that not only did a pod of orcas deliberately attack your ship, save your lives, and then guide you to an uncharted island, but that on this island you found evidence of what? An ancient cetacean civilization?" Emma shook her head. "Not ancient, Dr. Patel. Current, active. The structure we found, the technology it contained, it's far beyond our current capabilities. We're dealing with a level of intelligence and civilization that we've never encountered before. And yet you have no physical evidence, Dr. Patel countered. No samples, no artifacts. Just your testimony and some inconclusive video footage. We couldn't risk removing anything from the site, Emma explained, fighting to keep the frustration out of her voice. We didn't understand the technology, the potential consequences, and more importantly, we didn't have permission. This wasn't a ruin to be excavated. Is an active installation. Removing anything could have been seen as a hostile act. The committee chair raised an eyebrow. By the ORCAs, you mean? Yes, Emma said firmly. By the ORCAs, and potentially by whatever larger organization or civilization they represent. The room fell silent for a moment, the implications of her words hanging heavy in the air. Dr. Sinclair, a new voice spoke up. It belonged to Admiral Reeves, the naval representative on the panel. Let's say, for argument's sake, that we accept your account. What exactly are you proposing we do with this information? Emma felt a surge of relief. This was the opening she had been hoping for. We need to establish communication, she said, her voice gaining strength. The ORCAs reached out to us for a reason. They showed us the state of our oceans, the damage we're doing, and the potential consequences if we don't change course. But they also showed us a vision of hope, of humans and marine life coexisting in harmony. I believe they're offering us a chance to work together, to save our oceans and by extension our planet. She paused, looking each panel member in the eye. But to do that, we need to commit resources. We need a dedicated research team, a permanent presence in the area where we encountered the ORCAs. We need linguists, cryptographers, marine biologists, conservationists, a multidisciplinary team to help us bridge the gap between our species. The room erupted in discussion, voices overlapping as the panel members debated amongst themselves. Emma stood silently, her heart pounding. Everything hinged on this moment. After what felt like an eternity, the committee chair raised her hand for silence. Dr. Sinclair, what you're proposing is unprecedented. The resources required, the potential geopolitical implications, it's not a decision we can make lightly. Emma felt her heart sink, but the chair wasn't finished. However, she continued, the potential implications of your discovery, if verified, are too significant to ignore. We'll need time to deliberate, to consult with our respective agencies and governments. But I believe I speak for the panel when I say that further investigation is warranted. A wave of relief washed over Emma. It wasn't full acceptance, but it was a start, a foot in the door. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. That's all I ask. A chance to prove what we've seen, what we've experienced. A chance to open a dialogue that could change everything. As the meeting adjourned, Emma felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see Sarah, her eyes shining with unshed tears. You did it, Sarah whispered. They're listening. Emma managed a small smile. It's just the beginning, Sarah. We've got a long way to go. As they left the conference room, Emma's mind was already racing with plans. She knew the road ahead would be challenging. There would be more skeptics to convince, more evidence to gather, more mysteries to unravel. But for the first time since they'd returned from that fateful expedition, she felt a glimmer of real hope. Outside, the sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Emma paused for a moment, looking out over the urban landscape. Somewhere beyond those buildings, beyond the horizon, the ocean waited. And in its depths, the ORCAs were waiting too, waiting for humanity to answer their call. 3 months later, Emma stood on the deck of the research vessel Harmony, her eyes scanning the familiar waters of the North Sea. The ship, larger and more advanced than even the Morrigan, hummed with activity as scientists and crew members prepared for their latest excursion. Dr. Sinclair, a voice called from behind her. Emma turned to see Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the brilliant linguist who had joined their team, approaching with a tablet in hand. I think we've made a breakthrough in decoding the symbol patterns from the island structure. Emma's heart leaped. Show me, she said eagerly, following Yuki to the ship's main laboratory. Inside, the lab was a hive of activity. Screens displayed complex data readouts, sonar images, and video feeds from underwater drones. In the center of it all stood a holographic projection of the island structure, slowly rotating to reveal every intricate detail they had managed to capture. Yuki pulled up a series of images on her tablet. We've been analyzing the patterns, looking for recurring elements, trying to match them with the ORCA vocalizations we've recorded. And look at this. She pointed to a particular sequence of symbols, then played an audio clip. The complex series of clicks, whistles, and pulsed calls seemed to match the rhythm and structure of the visual pattern. It's a language, Emma breathed, her mind racing with the implications. Not just communication, but a full, complex language. Yuki nodded excitedly. Exactly. And what's more, we're beginning to see patterns that suggest grammatical structures, syntax. It's unlike any language we've encountered, but it follows logical rules. We can learn this, Dr. Sinclair. We can communicate with them. Emma felt a surge of excitement tempered by a healthy dose of caution. This is incredible work, Yuki, but we need to be careful. We can't risk misinterpreting, sending the wrong message. Of course, Yuki agreed. We'll need to run more analyses, cross-reference with our behavioral observations. But I really think we're on the verge of a breakthrough. As if on cue, an alarm sounded from one of the monitoring stations. Dr. Chen, who had been overseeing the sonar operations, called out, "We've got contacts. Multiple large bodies approaching from the northeast." Emma rushed to his side, her heart pounding. On the sonar display, she could see a group of large shapes moving with purpose towards their position. "It's them," she said softly. "They're here." The next few hours were a blur of activity. As the ORCA pod drew closer, the harmony became a hub of frenetic energy. Scientists rushed to prepare recording equipment, to calibrate sensors, to ready the underwater communication devices they had developed based on their analysis of ORCA vocalizations. Emma stood on the observation deck watching as the first dorsal fins broke the surface. She recognized the distinctive shape of the mother orca's fin, a sight that still sent a shiver down her spine. "Beautiful, aren't they?" Captain McLeod's gruff voice came from beside her. The old sailor had insisted on being part of this mission, despite offers of a comfortable retirement. "Hard to believe these are the same creatures that nearly killed us." Emma nodded, her eyes never leaving the water. "They're so much more than we ever imagined, Captain. We're just beginning to scratch the surface." As the orcas began to circle, the ship, a familiar pattern of clicks and whistles, filled the air. Dr. Tanaka's voice crackled over the intercom. "We're receiving complex vocalizations, initiating playback of our response sequence." A series of carefully constructed sounds emanated from underwater speakers, their first attempt at direct communication. Emma held her breath, watching the orca's reaction closely. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, to her amazement, the pod began to move in a tightly choreographed pattern. It was almost like a dance, their movements precise and deliberate. "They're responding," Emma whispered, her voice filled with awe. "Yuki, are you seeing this?" "Every second," came the excited reply. "The movements correspond to specific vocal patterns. It's another layer of communication." As the hours wore on, the exchange continued. The orcas would vocalize and move in specific patterns, and the research team would analyze and respond as best they could. It was slow, filled with missteps and misunderstandings, but Emma could feel the gap between their species narrowing with each interaction. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Emma felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Sarah, her face etched with concern. "Dr. Sinclair, you need to see this," Sarah said, holding out a tablet. Emma took it, her brow furrowing as she read the news alert on the screen. "An oil tanker collision?" "Where?" "About 100 miles south of our position," Sarah replied. "It's bad, Emma. Really bad. They're saying it could be one of the worst spills in North Sea history." Emma felt her heart sink. After all their progress, all their efforts to build trust and communication with the orcas, this disaster could undo everything. As if sensing the shift in mood, the orca pod's behavior changed. Their movements became more agitated, their vocalizations more urgent. "They know," Emma realized. "Somehow they know what's happened." She turned to Sarah, her mind racing. "We need to respond, not just to the orcas but to the spill. Get me a line to command. We're the closest research vessel with the equipment to help with the cleanup. As Sarah hurried off to make the call, Emma turned back to the water. The mother orca had surfaced nearby, her intelligent eye fixed on Emma. In that gaze, Emma saw not just intelligence, but an emotion she could only describe as concern. "We'll make this right," Emma said softly. Not sure if the orca could understand her words, but hoping her intent would somehow come across. "We'll show you that we can be better, that we can protect our shared home." The orca exhaled loudly, sending up a spray of mist before diving beneath the waves. As she disappeared, Emma felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on her shoulders. They weren't just scientists anymore. They were diplomats, bridges between two worlds. And right now, those worlds needed them more than ever. The next week was a blur of activity. The Harmony had been quickly repurposed as a support vessel for the oil spill cleanup efforts. Emma and her team worked tirelessly, their expertise in marine ecosystems proving invaluable in minimizing the damage to local wildlife. Throughout it all, the orcas remained a constant presence. They seemed to be observing the cleanup efforts, occasionally even herding oil-slicked seabirds towards the rescue boats. Their behavior left no doubt in Emma's mind. They were actively participating in the cleanup in their own way. On the 7th day, as Emma was overseeing the deployment of a new batch of oil-eating bacteria, Dr. Tanaka burst onto the deck, her face flushed with excitement. "Dr. Sinclair, we've had a breakthrough." Emma quickly handed off her duties to a colleague and followed Yuki to the communication center they'd set up on board. "What is it, Yuki? What have you found?" Yuki's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up a series of spectrograms and visual patterns. "We've been analyzing the orca's vocalizations and movements during the cleanup. There's a clear pattern emerging. Look here and here." Emma leaned in, her eyes widening as she began to see what Yuki was pointing out. "It's instructions? They're trying to guide our efforts?" Yuki nodded vigorously. "Exactly. They're not just helping, they're directing. They have a comprehensive understanding of the ecosystem, of how the currents move, where the most vulnerable areas are. They're trying to show us the most effective way to contain and clean up the spill." Emma felt a surge of emotion, awe, excitement, and a profound sense of humility. "They're not just intelligent," she murmured. "They're experts, caretakers. They know this ecosystem in ways we're only beginning to understand." She straightened up, her mind racing with the implications. "Yuki, we need to incorporate this into our cleanup strategy immediately, and we need to find a way to communicate back to them, to let them know we understand and we're following their guidance." As Yuki hurried off to coordinate with the rest of the team, Emma made her way back to the deck. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the oil-slicked waters. In the distance, she could see the sleek forms of the orcas, moving with purpose through the waves. For a moment, Emma allowed herself to imagine a future where humans and orcas worked together as true partners, combining their unique strengths and knowledge to protect the oceans they shared. It was a future that just months ago would have seemed like an impossible dream. Now, it felt tantalizingly within reach. But as she watched an oil-covered seabird being gently lifted from the yaw water by a rescue worker, Emma was reminded of the immense challenges that lay ahead. They had made progress, yes, but there was still so much work to be done, so much damage to undo, so much trust to build. She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. They had been given an incredible opportunity, a chance to redefine humanity's relationship with the ocean and its inhabitants. She was determined not to waste it. As the cleanup efforts continued into the night, illuminated by floodlights and the bioluminescent trails of the orcas moving through the dark water, Emma felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was more than just science now. It was a mission, a calling, and she was ready to dedicate her life to seeing it through. 2 years later, Emma stood on the observation platform of the newly constructed Cetacean Communication and Research Center. The state-of-the-art facility, built on a small island not far from where they had first discovered the mysterious structure, represented the culmination of years of work, negotiation, and perseverance. The center was a marvel of sustainable architecture designed to have minimal impact on the local ecosystem, while providing cutting-edge research capabilities. Solar panels and tidal generators provided clean energy, while advanced filtration systems ensured that no pollutants entered the surrounding waters. But the true heart of the center was the massive underwater viewing chamber. It's transparent, walls offering an unprecedented view of the ocean depths. It was here that Emma now stood, watching in awe as a group of orcas swam by, their movements graceful and purposeful. "Still takes your breath away, doesn't it?" Sarah's voice came from behind her. Emma turned to see her former student, now a respected researcher in her own right, approaching with a tablet in hand. Emma smiled warmly. "Every single time. I don't think I'll ever get used to it." Sarah nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. "Well, get ready to have your mind blown all over again. The results from the latest communication trials are in." She handed the tablet to Emma, who quickly scanned the data. Her eyes widened as she took in the implications. Sarah, this is incredible. The level of information exchange, the complexity of the concepts being conveyed when we're well beyond simple communication now." Sarah beamed with pride. "I know. Dr. Tanaka thinks we're on the verge of true bilateral exchange, not just sharing information, but engaging in actual dialogue." Emma felt a surge of emotion as she contemplated how far they had come. From those terrifying moments on the sinking Selkie to this point, where humans and orcas were on the brink of genuine, meaningful communication. It seemed almost miraculous. A movement in the water caught her attention. The mother orca, the one who had been at the center of it all from the beginning, approached the viewing window. Her intelligent eye seemed to focus directly on Emma, and for a moment it felt as if they were communicating without words or vocalizations. A silent understanding, passing between two species that had once been so far apart. "She remembers you," Sarah said softly, watching the interaction with a mix of awe and scientific curiosity. Emma nodded, placing her hand against the cool glass. "And I remember her. Everything we've accomplished, everything we've learned, it all started with her." The orca moved closer, her massive form dwarfing the humans on the other side of the glass. She opened her mouth slightly, revealing rows of powerful teeth, but the gesture wasn't threatening. Instead, it almost looked like a smile. "Dr. Sinclair." A voice crackled over the intercom, breaking the moment. "You're needed in the communication lab. We're picking up some unusual signals from the deep-sea monitoring stations." Emma reluctantly turned away from the window, giving the orca one last look before heading towards the lab. As she walked, her mind raced with possibilities. Every day seemed to bring new discoveries, new challenges, new wonders. The communication lab was a hive of activity when Emma arrived. Screens displayed complex waveforms and spectrograms, while a team of linguists and marine biologists huddled around a central console. Dr. Yuki Tanaka looked up as Emma entered, her face a mix of excitement and confusion. "Dr. Sinclair, you need to hear this." She pressed a button and a series of haunting sounds filled the room. It started as a low, resonant hum, building to a complex melody of clicks, whistles, and deep, sonorous calls. "What am I listening to?" Emma asked, her brow furrowed, in concentration. "That's just it," Yuki replied. "We're not entirely sure. The frequency and structure are unlike anything we've recorded from our orcapods. It's coming from much deeper in the ocean." Emma's eyes widened as the implications hit her. "Are you saying—" Yuki nodded, her eyes shining with the thrill of discovery. "We think we might be picking up communications from other cetacean species, possibly even from species we haven't encountered before." The room fell silent as the magnitude of this potential discovery sank in. If they were indeed hearing from other, possibly unknown cetacean species, it could revolutionize their understanding of marine intelligence and communication. Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself against the rush of excitement and trepidation. "All right," she said, her voice filled with determination. "Let's get to work. We need to analyze these signals, try to pinpoint their origin. And we need to consult with our orca partners. They might have insights we couldn't even imagine." As the team sprang into action, Emma felt a familiar thrill run through her. This was why she had become a scientist, for moments like these when the boundaries of human knowledge were pushed back, revealing new wonders and mysteries. She glanced out the lab's window towards the vast expanse of the North Sea. Somewhere out there in the depths they had only begun to explore, something was calling out. And thanks to the partnership they had forged with the orcas, they might just be able to answer. The journey that had begun with a terrifying encounter on a sinking ship had led them here, to the brink of discoveries that could change humanity's relationship with the oceans and the incredible life within them. As Emma turned back to join her team in their analysis, she felt a profound sense of gratitude and purpose. The orcas had opened a door for them, inviting humanity into a larger world of intelligence and interconnectedness. Now it was up to them to step through that door with open minds and hearts, ready to learn, to grow, and to protect the wondrous life with which they shared this blue planet. As the new mysterious signals continued to play softly in the background, Emma allowed herself a small smile. The greatest adventure of her life, of human history perhaps, was only just beginning.